The pew cushions were still warm from Selina Hartwell's knees when Grace Linden understood that her cousin was not coming back. She did not yet know that within the hour she would be a duchess, nor that in a year she would tell this story by her own fire and laugh at the parts that had very nearly undone her. She knew only that the vestry door stood open on an empty garden, that the September heat lay over the churchyard like a hand pressed flat against the back of her neck, and that 40 guests sat waiting in the nave of St. Osyth's for a bride who had gone out of a window in her wedding slippers. It was Mrs. Pruitt who found the note, because Mrs. Pruitt was the only person in the house who thought to look under the missal instead of on top of it. She passed it over without a word, her ring of keys ticking once against her apron, and Grace read it standing, because sitting down for bad news had never once, in her experience, made it lighter. I cannot. Forgive me. Tell my father I have gone to save him a worse grief than this one. That was all. No name for where, no name for whom, only the ordinary round hand of a girl who dotted her as like a child and had never in her life kept a secret longer than a day, until, apparently, this one. Sir Aldous Hartwell arrived at the vestry door with his face the color of old paper and his voice pitched for calm and failing at it entirely. She would not, he said. She would not do this to him. Not today. Not with. And there he stopped himself, but Grace had kept his household books for 4 years and finished the sentence in her own head without the least difficulty. Not today. With the Michaelmas notes falling due in a fortnight, and this marriage the only thing standing between the family and the bailiffs. She has done it, Grace said. The question is no longer whether. The question is what we tell 40 people presently listening to an organist repeat the same 8 bars for the 3rd time. Through the vestry's inner door she could see them, the bishop with his hands folded and his patience visibly thinning, Lady Cordelia Ames watching the empty aisle with an expression of exquisite cataloguing interest, and near the altar rail, still and silent as a man carved for a tomb, the Duke of Ashcombe. Julian Voss did not pace. He did not send for wine or loosen his cravat or demand answers of the footman. He stood with his hands loose at his sides and his face composed into the particular blankness of a man taking a blow without letting his face report it. And something in that stillness told Grace more in 10 seconds than her uncle's babbling had told her in 10 minutes. He had never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. She suspected, watching him, that he had never needed to raise it to survive worse mornings than this one either. Near him, immaculate in gray superfine, his cousin Mr. Edmund Voss turned a signet ring once around his smallest finger and observed, to no one in particular, that it was a great pity, a very great pity, and that the settlements had been so prettily drawn. Mr. Colborne, Grace turned to the family's solicitor, who stood clutching the license as though it might combust in his hands. Read me the wording. Exactly. He read it. The special license, procured at some expense and greater haste, granted permission for the Duke of Ashcombe to marry Miss Hartwell of Frayne, spinster of this parish, no Christian name attached, because Sir Aldous, in his economy, had asked Colborne to spare the extra line, and Colborne, in his own economy, had let a general style stand for a particular girl. Grace looked at the paper. She looked at her uncle, gray and drowning. She looked at Selina's empty place in the row of family pews, and understood, with the particular clarity of a woman accustomed to finding where a column failed to balance, that there was exactly one door left unlocked in this whole ruinous morning, and that she was standing in it. I am Miss Hartwell of Frayne, she said. My mother was born one, and my uncle has fed and housed me under that name for 11 years, license or no license. I'll take her place. Sir Aldous said her name in 3 different tones of horror before he managed a full sentence. Mr. Colborne said something about propriety that nobody troubled to heed. It was Julian who crossed the vestry to her, unhurried, and looked at her the way she imagined he looked at a ledger someone had handed him upside down, not offended, only recalculating. "You understand what you are offering." "I keep this family's accounts, Your Grace. I understand exactly what I am offering, to the shilling." "That was not what I asked. It was the only part of the question I could answer honestly this morning." She held his gaze, because looking away would have cost her the only currency she had left to spend. "No one looks twice at the one who keeps the books. I am well used to it. I am not asking you to look twice now. I am asking you to let a wedding that has already been paid for, in every sense that matters, go forward with the bride still standing in the room." Something moved behind his eyes, quick as a bird crossing a window, and was gone before she could be certain she had seen it. "The bishop is not a fool," he said. "He will know one Hartwell daughter from another." "The bishop has never met either of us," Grace said, "and the license does not require him to." Edmund Voss, arriving at his cousin's elbow with the mild solicitude of a man merely being helpful, observed that the arrangement was certainly novel, and that the quarter-day audit fell in a little more than a fortnight, and that no doubt everything, the wedding, the ledgers, the family's fortunes generally, would want to be settled well before Michaelmas. He said it lightly, smoothing one immaculate glove over the other. Grace filed it away without yet knowing she would need it. Julian did not consult his cousin. He did not consult the solicitor, or the bishop, or his own evident astonishment. He looked once more at Grace Linden, at the steadiness of her hands, folded rather than wrung. At a woman who had walked into the wreckage of someone else's flight and offered herself, whole as the repair. And he said, "Very well," in the tone of a man closing a ledger for the night, gently and for good. They were married within the half-hour, before a bishop too proud to admit confusion and 40 guests too well-bred to ask aloud what everyone in the nave was privately thinking. Grace Linden walked out of St. Osyth's on the arm of a duke who had, until that morning, never spoken more than 40 words to her in her life, and somewhere behind them, in a room thick with murmurs, Lady Cordelia Ames observed to her nearest neighbor that some women did contrive to marry remarkably well out of remarkably little, and that it would be so very interesting to watch what such a woman did with the rest of it. The carriage to Ashcombe was the first time they were entirely alone, and Julian used the silence the way Grace suspected he used most silences, as a wall to stand behind while he decided what to say next. She let him have it. She had learned patience the way she had learned bookkeeping, out of necessity rather than virtue, and she used the quiet to look, without seeming to look, at the man she had married. He was larger than the altar rail had made him seem, and his hands, resting loosely on his knees, were not a gentleman's hands at all. Scarred at the knuckle, browned by weather no duke was strictly required to stand in, a groundsman's hands finished with a duke's cuffs. He caught her looking and did not pretend not to have noticed. "You will want to know the terms," he said. "I generally do. You will have a household to run, and an allowance to run it on, and my name, which is worth a great deal more than either. You will not have my company beyond what civility requires, nor my confidence beyond what necessity demands. I did not marry for affection this morning, Mrs. Voss, and I see no reason to pretend otherwise to a woman clever enough to have engineered her own escape from a garret." It was not unkind, precisely. It was the voice of a man drawing a line and expecting it respected without argument. Grace considered several answers and chose the truest one available to her. "I did not engineer anything, Your Grace. I noticed a door standing open and walked through it before anyone thought to close it." There is a difference, though I grant it may not be visible from where you are presently sitting. And what do you want out of a bargain struck in a vestry with a stranger? "My uncle's roof kept over his head until Michaelmas is paid." My cousin found, wherever she has gone, and not abandoned to it merely because her flight proved inconvenient to the rest of us, and a room of my own with a door that locks, which I have not had in 11 years. She folded her hands in her lap. I do not require your confidence, sir. I have kept other people's secrets for my bread since I was 14 years old. I am reasonably good at it by now. Something crossed his face that might, in a less guarded man, have been the beginning of respect. You keep accounts. I kept my uncle's. My father taught me before he died he was a solicitor's clerk, not a gentleman, whatever claim my mother's blood gives me to the name Hartwell. He used to say a column that will not balance is not lying to you. It is only waiting to be asked the right question, patiently, as many times as it takes. A tidy philosophy. It has fed me for 11 years. Philosophies that feed you are worth the keeping, whatever their pedigree. He almost smiled at that. She watched it arrive and be suppressed, the way a man swallows a cough in church, and filed it away too, beside Edmund's remark about my Kelmis, not because she understood yet what either meant, but because nothing she had ever kept safe in a ledger had gone to waste in the end. They spoke, in the hours that followed, of practical things, the house, the staff, the story that would be told to callers, which was the plain unadorned truth, stripped of its more damaging particulars, that Miss Hartwell, indisposed, had asked her cousin to stand in a family arrangement of long understanding. It was thin enough that no one who wished to believe it would strain it, and Julian delivered the fiction to his own household with the flat authority of a man who did not invite follow-up questions. It was Mrs. Pruitt, that first evening, who told Grace what nobody else troubled to. She came to turn down a bed in a room twice the size of any Grace had slept in since her father died, set down the warming pan, and stood with her hands folded the way she had stood at 100 deathbeds and half as many christenings. You'll have heard he buried his father and his brother inside 18 months, she said, without preamble. Fever took the old Duke. The brother went to a duel he needn't have fought, over a debt that wasn't even his to settle, and his Grace has never once said so aloud. But he blames himself for being 3 counties off when word came. He came home a duke at 26, with a house full of people waiting to see him fail at it. He does not raise his voice, Mrs. Voss, he has never needed to. But do not mistake the quiet in him for peace. It is a debt he is still paying, a little at a time, out of a purse he never lets anyone see him open, and his cousin, Grace, asked. Mrs. Pruitt's mouth did something complicated, folding in on itself like a letter no one wanted to finish reading. Mr. Voss kept this house running while his Grace was too buried in grief to do it himself, and no one has ever heard a word of thanks pass between them, which is its own kind of tragedy. He is very good with figures. A pause, waited like a held breath before a plunge. Better than is entirely comfortable if you ask a housekeeper who has watched the coal bills for 9 years and cannot say why they never quite match the coal. She said no more that night, and Grace did not press her, because a secret offered before its time is a secret spoiled twice over. But she lay a long while in the strange bed with her father's old daybook on the coverlet beside her, the little brass-cornered book she had carried from lodging to lodging since she was 9 years old, and thought about coal that never quite matched its bills, and about a man who had decided at 26 that grief was a thing best carried alone in a locked room. The house learned of the wedding by post before it learned of it by visit, and the visits, when they came, arrived with knives sheathed neatly in compliments. Lady Cordelia Ames called within the week, sat very straight in the best chair, admired the drawing-room's new duchess with the particular warmth of a woman counting another woman's silver, and remarked that it was so refreshing, in an age of calculation, to see a marriage made purely upon impulse. It was made on necessity, Lady Cordelia. Grace said. I have found impulse considerably more expensive, in my experience, though I am told it wears better in company. Cordelia's fan closed with a small, definite click, like a door deciding not to open further. How practical you are. I am sure His Grace finds it restful after so much feeling in the family lately. It was Edmund Voss, arriving on the heels of that visit under the excuse of estate business, who first made his threat gentle enough to be mistaken for kindness by anyone not already watching for it. He found Grace in the estate office. She had asked to see the household accounts within her first fortnight, a request that had surprised the staff and did not, apparently, surprise him in the least, and stood over her shoulder a moment too long as she turned the pages. You have a talent for it, he said. Unusual in a lady. My cousin's brother-in-law, God rest him, could not add a column of 5 figures without the use of his fingers. He smiled. It did not reach the eyes, though the mouth performed its part faultlessly. The way a well-trained servant performs a bow, he does not mean. You'll find the estate books rather more tangled than a country parson's household, Mrs. Voss. I would not trouble yourself overmuch with them. I have kept them steady through 2 bereavements and a change of duke. It would be a shame for anyone's confidence in this family to be shaken by a new hand mistaking an old system for an error. I have no wish to shake anyone's confidence, Mr. Voss. I only wish to understand what I have married into. Root and branch. Of course. He straightened a stack of letters that did not need straightening, a small habitual gesture. A ring turned once around a finger and stilled again. Though I wonder sometimes whether understanding is always a kindness. Your cousin understood a great deal, I think, and see where it carried her. He said it mildly, almost sorrowfully, and was gone from the room before Grace could ask what, precisely, he meant by it, leaving the question to sit in the air the way smoke sits in a closed room long after the candle that made it has gone out.